Steve, as you may have heard, I just described it, or at least quoted a Democratic congressman who's calling the Obama budget a nervous breakdown on paper. And there is so much to talk about here. But everybody in Washington is describing it as primarily a political document. I guess my first question to you is there anything real inside this budget?
Well, there are a lot of phony numbers here, no question about it. I've spent the last 6 hours, Dan, really perusing this budget, going through the couple thousand pages of the federal budget. And, you know, there's a lot of funny numbers with respect to promised cuts in the future that probably will never happen. The real tax increase is probably close to $2 trillion. Almost all the savings the president is claiming are really almost all tax increases. But I will give the president credit for one thing, Dan. I think it is honest in the sense that it is telling the American people, if you reelect me, here's what I'm going to do. And he's saying, look, I'm going to raise taxes on all kinds of investment, capital gains, dividend, estate taxes, small businesses. I'm going to have a big stimulus plan, a mini stimulus of $350 billion. We're not going to touch the entitlement programs. And we're going to have another $1 trillion of debt every year. That's essentially I guess what I'm saying, Dan, is if you liked what this president did in the last 4 years on the budget, you're going to love the second term if he gets one.
Sounds like it. It's clear that the president, at this point, is suggesting that the solution to most of the problems embedded historically in the budget, such as the deficit, can be solved by raising taxes on the rich. But there's a new wrinkle here that really jumped out at me, and that's the idea that he is going to eliminate the AMT, the alternative minimum tax, by enacting the Buffett rule, the minimum 30% tax on millionaires. I mean, is it possible? The AMT has been the biggest 800-pound gorilla in the room for years. Can it go away simply by enacting the Buffett rule?
Well, you know, the Buffett rule would only affect, not that many taxpayers, maybe people in the top 1% or even less than that, Dan. Whereas the alternative minimum tax, as you know, this next year could hit as many as 30 million people. So, if they're talking about getting rid of the alternative minimum tax, hallelujah. It's about time. That was a tax that was supposed to only affect, as you know, back when it was first put into effect back in the late 60s, a few hundred very, very wealthy families. And the real danger is that with this new super minimum tax, the Buffett rule, will apply to more and more taxpayers all the time, just as the original alternative minimum tax did.
We should just clarify one more time. The president keeps talking about the wealthy needing to do their fair share, the Buffett rule, Warren Buffett's a billionaire. Exactly how is the president describing the word wealthy? Who, in his mind, are the quote-unquote wealthy Americans?
Yeah, by the way, Dan, the president gave his speech today in suburban Virginia, and I think he used the word fairness at least 8 times in that speech. More than he used the word economic growth and how do we get back to prosperity. So the whole emphasis of this budget really is, quote, fairness, not regenerating growth for an economy that's been flat on its back. The president is talking about any individual who makes over $200,000 a year and any couple that makes over $250,000 a year, subject to a lot of these tax increases. The Buffett rule would apply to those who make over $1 million. But as I just said, this is a bait and switch, because every time they put into effect these taxes on rich people, within a few years they start to apply to more and more middle-class families.
Well, you're right. The president does talk all the time about fairness and everyone having to play by the rules. What are the growth elements inside the president's budget or in his platform? Because in terms of fairness, Paul Gigot and I were just talking about the problems that Europe has gotten itself into, and by the president's definition, the European continent is undoubtedly much more fair than the United States in compressing incomes, but their growth rates have been historically below ours for at least the 35 years. How does the president intend to lift the U.S. growth rate?
Well, I think, Dan, in fact, I just wrote an editorial on this where I basically said what you just said, that really the vision here in this budget, in the whole Obamonomics package, has been to make America look much more like Europe. I mean, I think he very much likes the high tax rate, cradle-to-grave kind of safety net that is endemic in the system in Greece and France and Italy and other countries. And so this is clearly a president who has made a gamble that the American people want safety and fairness over robust economic growth. And my response to that is what John F. Kennedy said, that a rising tide of growth is going to lift all boats. And this idea of just dividing the pie into different slices is not a very good recipe for long-term economic prosperity for this country. And it's not going to help the middle class because you're just shrinking the pie over time.
All right, Steve, we got 9 or 10 months to see whether the president can sell it. Thanks a lot.